Squashfuls. That's what's on tap this week in Meal Prep with Rick. Well, I've actually made this dish 2 days ago, and I made acorn squash and spaghetti squash. Today we're making butternut squash and spaghetti squash again because I really like that. And so this is two different squashes that I haven't had since I was a kid, and I really didn't think I liked. You may find, like me, that the tastes of these very underused and underrated vegetables is really good. Also, not a lot of ingredients, not a lot of time to make, and it saves a ton of money because these is less than $2 a serving to make these. And that's great on the budget. Health-wise, if you're worried about your weight or you have type 2 diabetes or you're watching your blood glucose levels, this will not spike your glucose levels. And that's a great thing as we're trying to get healthy. So let's look at the ingredients for this. Obviously, we need squash. So this is the second time I've made it. I've used spaghetti squash twice. Here's my spaghetti squash ready to go. I've got butternut squash, and we made it with acorn squash. So whatever kind of squash you like or you want to try. We need an onion, red pepper, some corn, frozen, fresh, it doesn't matter. Black beans. I'm adding mushrooms. I don't care if it's in the recipe or not. We get to play with our food and make it the way we want it when we meal prep. Salt, pepper, cumin, chili powder, garlic, some salsa, and either sharp cheddar cheese or some sort of Mexican blend. I've got taco cheese with cheddar, Monterey Jack, Colby, and added spices that I really like. So that's all the ingredients we have. This is a super simple list of things that you're going to use to make this. The first thing we're going to do is take our big old knife and hope that this is not as hard to do as spaghetti squash. Spaghetti squash, you have to kind of put the knife in. This is much easier. With spaghetti squash, it's really super hard. And you've got to be really careful not to cut your fingers off while you're trying to get it cut. Acorn squash was also much easier. Now, this is still not as easy as cutting a tomato, but all we got to do is cut it in half. And that's what we're doing. We're cutting it in half. Well, you can see it doesn't want to be eaten. Got most of the way there. All right. And then I have a bowl to not waste anything. We're going to compost these seeds. So we just scoop out the seeds. So we have a bowl. And actually with the spaghetti squash, we don't have to do anything else. With the acorn squash, we didn't either. With this one, we will have to take out a little more of the flesh after it's cooked. But we'll find other uses for that. So it's going to end up with a little hollow in it. Obviously, we're not going to waste the flesh. We're going to use it, so we're not going to take it out now and make that bigger bowl. These are going to go in the oven at 400 degrees. And we are going to remember this time to set the timer. Setting the timer and preheating the oven, two things that Rick is not great at. So I have tin foil on the sheet and a little bit of avocado oil, because avocado oil can handle high heat. We're just going to put that on upside down and throw it in the oven. So that's going to cook for 40 to 45 minutes. The next step is to take most of this stuff over to the stove where we're going to take on making the filling for this. So we're back to the filling now. Squash is in the oven. We work on the filling. Now, you've all seen ground beef browned or have done it yourself. So I've already done that part of it. And now all we have to do is take the onion, bell pepper, and corn, dip those all in there. I chopped those a minute ago too. You don't really need to see me doing that. And it calls for a cup of corn. So we'll take that and put it in. And don't worry, we won't waste what's left of the corn. I'll use it in my breakfast scrambles tomorrow. You're going to hear that about the beans next. Okay. And we're going to turn the heat up a little bit so that comes to heat. And while that's going, we need to drain the beans, of course, and the mushrooms. So we'll get those drained because those will go in just a little bit. Okay, y'all know I love mushrooms, so those are going to be great. With beans, obviously you need to make sure that you drain them and rinse them, or else it's not going to work very well. Got to make sure you get them all out, you know. Okay, it calls for a cup of beans, so I'm just going to get that cup ready so that when they're ready to go in, we're ready to go. One of the things I always do when I'm meal prepping is I check the recipe a lot to make sure I'm not missing anything, right? Onion, bell pepper, corn, stir for about 5 minutes, then we'll stir in the beans, the salsa, and the spices. So it's starting to come up to heat, and that's going to get, the whole point of this is to get those onions and peppers softened up. And you can see this is a big pan. Okay, there's my hand. Right. So this is a very large pan. So you're not going to want to try and do this like I tried the first time on a small frying pan. You need a little bit of space here to make this happen. All right. And then what I'm going to do is cheat just a little bit because personally, I think the spices in it while it's cooking make it better. It gives it more time to soak in. So it calls for half a teaspoon of garlic. We'll just throw that in there. And I just kind of make sure I'm not getting big clumps in there so that it doesn't cause issues. Calls for a teaspoon of chili powder. We'll put the lid on later, obviously. Teaspoon of chili powder. That gives it a little heat. And you'll notice if you do spaghetti squash, for some reason, that already tends to have its own little bit of heat to it. That really gives you a nice little burn as it's going down. All right, and that was cumin, a teaspoon of that. And then salt and pepper to taste. I like salt and pepper, so we'll do a teaspoon of each. The dreaded to taste. If you've not had it before, how do you know if you're putting in enough? You don't. They put in more. Perfection is not the goal. As you do these things more than once, you'll notice how you like things. And I know from the last batch of this I made, a little extra salt and pepper is not going to hurt, especially if it's healthy pink Himalayan sea salt. All right, keep stirring. And this will go on for about 5 minutes, and then we'll be adding some more ingredients. All right, guys, it's time to do the beans salsa. Not a minute too soon for the salsa because it's getting a little dry in here. All the greases, what little bit there was, has burned off, as it were. And then the mushrooms. Oh, don't those look good? And we're going to stir all this in, and then we're going to bring down the heat, and we're going to let this simmer for 5 minutes. First, I want to make sure it's all stirred in because I want all of these. Well, let's turn the heat down. I want all of these different flavors and textures to kind of mix in together and become one, as it were. You can hear the sizzle coming down. That's a good thing because we were getting a little bit of little flavor spots on the ground beef there where it was getting a little charged, which is not a bad thing as long as we don't let it burn, right? All right. So she's calming down some. Just make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. We're going to let this simmer for 5 minutes, which means I'm going to turn it down even a little bit more. Turn it down to 2. I'll put the lid on it. And all I'm going to do is stir it every once in a while to make sure that nothing is sticking and it's just stirred up a little bit more so that everything has a chance to come together. We're almost there. Hang on. We're back, and it's time to do the easiest part of this whole process. With spaghetti squash, if you've never seen spaghetti squash before, when you run a fork across it, you get these little spaghetti strands. So all you have to do, oh, and this is really well done. Sometimes they're a little harder than others, all right? Without breaking the bowl like I just did, you want to scrape all of those out into little strands. And then, because it's going to be easier to combine, we're going to put it into a bowl. If I did the butternut squash or the acorn squash, the other kind of squash first, I would throw in the toppings. But with the spaghetti squash, you want to mix the strands and the toppings. So that's why I'm not just throwing it in the bowl because the butternut squash is in the oven, and I'll do that afterwards. So when it's all done, or mostly done, even if you have a crack, you have an empty shell, right? So we're going to do both of these. Obviously, don't fry this straight out of the oven. I've let these cool off a little bit. Now, they're still very warm. I don't know if you can see the steam or not, but they're not burning my hands off, which you don't want to do. So you want to make sure that you're either really careful, use oven mitts or something when you're doing it if it's right out of the oven. But for me, I just let it cool a little bit and makes it super simple to just get all this done. I think it also makes it so that if it didn't quite cook all the way in the oven, it kind of cooks in its own steam while it's cooling off. All right, this one, much better. I didn't break it, okay? Well, see, with meal prep, you learn as you go. So we're going to take about half of this and put it in here. And then maybe I should use the bigger bowl. But we're just going to, kind of like spaghetti, we're just going to mix it all up. It doesn't have to be perfect because if I want more meat in there, I just put a little bit less of this and put some of the meat out of the pan on top if I don't feel like I'm getting the right mix. So yes, I would try to use a bigger bowl to do this mixing than I did. It's one of those things you learn as you're going. But like we always say, doesn't matter what happens, As long as it's not burnt, we're probably eating this stuff. All right, so that's pretty well stirred in. I'll add a little bit more of that as we go. And then you just pour it back in the bowl carefully, especially with the broken one. Okay, now I would like to see a little more meat. I'm just going to put a layer of it in there, like yay. I tell you what, this stuff absolutely smells amazing. And what I found for myself, your mileage may vary, was that each one of these really turns into 2 meals unless you're super hungry, especially if you're doing it for lunch. So each bowl. All right, so I've got the bowl there. If I wanted to, I'm gonna put just a little bit more of the good stuff on top. Ooh, and a mushroom. Okay, and then you're gonna sprinkle it with some cheese. You're gonna throw it in the oven for 10 minutes, and then you can serve right from there. Now, the thing I do when I do this is I actually put more cheese on afterwards when I go to eat it as well, because the cheese doesn't get all the way through being on top like that. And we've already had the discussion about how much I like cheese. Folks, that's it. I take this, I put it back in the oven for 10 minutes, and I've got 3 to 4 meals, depending on how hungry I am. And it's absolutely delicious. Butternut squash, I'm sure that's going to be delicious as well. Acorn squash was great. But the whole thing is find the ingredients that you like, the things that you like, or experiment like I'm doing. And you may find that there's a lot more things that you do like that you can eat on a regular basis. Now, one thing about spaghetti squash, even the acorn squash and the butternut squash, is they're not going to be the easiest thing to store in the bowl. This is really more for the pictures. And if you're serving them, great. You put them on a platter and serve them like this for dinner. They look amazing. But what I'm going to do for mine is I'm going to take all the innards out. I'm going to put it in a glass storage container so that I can have it in the fridge or in the freezer to eat later on. So try it. Pick a squash, pick a filling, put them together, and please let us know how you liked it. Did you experiment? Did you stay with something you already knew that you liked? It's all fun with meal prep. And that's what we'd like to have you do, is to have fun with meal prep. So why don't you go check us out? Go to school.com/meal prep. Try our new 30-day challenge where we'll take you from knowing very little to nothing about meal prep. Within a month, we'll turn you into a meal prep master. And that's guaranteed.